Okay, are you tired? I am. It's almost 6. It's been a long day, so I took the decision unilaterally that you're going to work a little bit. Okay, just a little bit, not much. Okay, so we're going to be talking for the next 20-25 minutes about interviewing an adolescent, and the first question that comes to mind is, why should we be talking about interviewing an adolescent? Is it that different from interviewing a child or an adult? And if the answer is yes, what are the differences? It's a question. Yeah. So when you answer one after the other, because if you answer all at the same time, it's a little bit difficult to understand.
I won't make any comment
because you know. Okay. What are the two main differences?
I think they're not interested as such. Like, it's really hard to captivate their interest in that conversation.
Okay.
They're always tweeting on their phone and, always busy with something else at the moment.
Okay.
Always somewhere else.
Okay.
And I think it's very hard not to patronize them, because in a way they look like adults and they might see themselves as already mature and capable of understanding some things. So I think it's very important that during conversations with adolescents, we do not make them feel infantile in a way, to infantilize them while trying to have a conversation with them. And it's always a trade-off in making sure that, we find the right wave of communication so that they are our equal, but in the same time.
Because when we interview an adult, we don't infantilize them. I mean, I had a physician, an internist who didn't know I was a pediatrician, who said to me, these are the arteries. It's like the plumbing system in your body. I said, no, so that's infantilizing it, isn't it? Yes.
The children are often short in their responses.
Okay, so they don't give long answers. Okay, but yes.
And they usually are accompanied by adults, so they are not very into disclosing things.
Good. So what should we do?
We should involve the family and then talk alone with the adolescent.
So what should we do?
Talk with the adolescent.
Okay, but there's something else we need to do. Pardon me?
Reassuring them that we're going to respect them.
Okay, so we're going to talk about confidentiality. Yes. Good. That's the first point. Okay, confidentiality. Are there limits to confidentiality?
Yes.
How many? One?
Life-threatening.
Life-threatening.
And legal, if whatever is disclosed it might affect them, or it's not legal what's happening to them, then again we might.
So, then if they're smoking dope, you have to...
No.
STDs are reportable, so I think that's one of the...
Okay, so there are things that we are obliged to report. An STD would be a reason, but this usually it's done, or an abuse, for example, sexual abuse. Okay, so when there is a danger for themselves, when you have to report it, and what's the third one?
Danger for others.
Pardon me?
Danger for others.
Danger for others. Okay, so these are the three main limitations. What's the other thing that changes enormously when you interview an adolescent? And you said it. And from when you interview, for example, a child. It's very linked to that. Now it's the point where you get the drums.
Perhaps competence, Gillick competence. It's how much they understand and how much you can, I don't know, it's about Gillick competence. That's one of the issues I think we always have to bear in mind. So you've got Victoria Gillick. I mean, there are other examples as well. On Victoria wanting contraception.
Yeah.
And she was completely, so she's cognitively able to make that decision, but then the court had to make a decision because her mother objected. So there's guilty competence. So is that competence is an issue with, when you're talking to adolescents?
Yeah, but still you can have an adult who is not very competent too.
Well, of course, but that's
the adult's problem. No, but I mean, what's different here? Yes.
They're minors,
Okay.
so their legal guardians need to be involved.
Okay. So the role of the parents changes here. Okay, you ask them to leave the room, which when they are 4, 5, 3 months old, you don't do. Okay, so there's a change in the things you are doing. And when you're a pediatrician and it's somebody that you've seen since barely she or he was born, it's a huge change for these parents. Okay, it's a huge difference because you put them aside. Okay, say you're not that important anymore. When you interview an adolescent, I think that the main thing is to have a plan in mind. Okay, and this is something that has been studied for years, and there have been many ideas coming out. The first one probably was done by Bob Brown about what he called the 5 boxes. Okay, physical health, school, romance, peers, and home. These were the 5 things you should talk about. Problem with what Bob did is that there was no line here. I mean, where do you start? Where do you finish? From which one you go to another one? So it didn't last long. Second one came from Howard Schubiner, and he called it the safe times. Safe times was an acronym for the first letters. The problem is that Howard said, well, to do it right, you have to use it backwards. So instead of safe times, it's IFAS SEMIT, which doesn't help very much if you have to remember it. The last one that, from my point of view, has always been the best is the HEEADSSS acronym. Okay, you're probably familiar with that. The first one came out in '88, if my memory is good. Then in 2004 there was another one. And a couple of years ago, in 2014, there was the third version. The HEEADSSS acronym is very easy. You remember it's for home, education, eating, activities, drugs, sexuality, suicide, and safety. That includes violence. What are the advantages from my point of view? The first one is that you don't need to follow them in this order, but if you do, you go from questions that are very easily answered to questions that are more complicated. So that's a good point. The other point that I try to teach my residents with, a success that could be discussed is that this is not just to know about the adolescents. This is an excellent tool for prevention too. And we rarely use it that way. Okay? It's a good tool for prevention, and I'll come back to that later on. So, what are the questions you ask in each one of these parts? Where, for the age of home, well, where does the adolescent live? With whom does he or she live? Does he or she have siblings? Do they have, how is the family ambience at home? How are things doing? Have they moved lately? How is the school year for education? How is the academic performance? Is he doing better? Is he doing worse than last year? Is he doing as usual? How is the relationship with the teacher, with the colleagues? Has he or she changed school lately, and why? Or is he or she working? He's doing an apprenticeship. Where? How many hours? Since when? How is the relationship with the co-workers, with the boss? What are the future projects that this young person has? We always think about the questions about eating for girls, and this is a mistake. We have epidemiological data showing that at least 10% of boys have troubles with eating disorders, or at least disordered eating. So it's not a girls thing, it's a young people thing. Okay, so what do they eat? How many meals? Do they skip meals? Who does she or he eat with? Who prepares meals at home? Are there weight changes lately by excess or by reduction? Is he or she on a diet? Are there other methods that they use to control weight, and how do they see their body image? The A for activities, it was what are the activities he or she does with friends or with family for fun? Do they do sport or physical activity, and what type and what frequency? Do they have hobbies? And hobbies could be that they like to be on the internet, not too long, we've been discussing that before, but that could be a hobby. What are the relationship with his or her friends? When we talk about substances, that's the D for drugs, is he smoking or using alcohol or cannabis or other drugs? How often? Does he do that alone or with friends, before going to school, on weekends? Are there other people in the family with drug problems? Have they ever been in a car or a vehicle with somebody who is intoxicated at the wheel? Questions about sexuality. Do they have a partner? What's the partner's age? Do they have sexual intercourse, type of contraception, if they have any? Number of partners, ever pregnant, ever a sexually transmitted infection? And for girls, age and menarche and date at last periods. I have a story about that. 2 years ago, I went back to General Pediatrics in Lausanne, and every morning at 7:45 we have a session where the people who was at the emergency room the day before tell us how they went and if they hospitalized somebody and all that stuff. And I found out that nobody knows exactly why, but any adolescent girl who will come to the emergency room with abdominal pain will get a pregnancy test. So I asked, why do you get a pregnancy test? Well, it's part of the differential diagnosis. No, girl, abdominal pain could be well, isn't it easier to ask the girl if she might be pregnant? So, oh, we do that too. Say, then why do you do the pregnancy test? We know that adolescent girls lie very often. That was the answer, because adult people never lie. That's something that is very well documented too. So the last one, and this is the end of the story, is that I said, well, okay, so you did this was a young male resident. You did a pregnancy test that, as usual, came out negative. He said, yes. I said, did you ask her by chance when she had her last menses? I said, oh, yes, I did. She's having them now. If you want to imagine somebody who got really reddish in his face, that was that guy when he made the connection between the two. There's mental health too, and how does she or he feel? Are they feeling sad? Do they have trouble sleeping or trouble with appetite? Do they have any suicidal ideation? If this is the case, do they have a plan? Can they talk about it to anyone? Do they have somebody that could help them if this is the case? And finally, safety. Well, using helmet or seat belt, even with a bike, which is something that kids and adults do very rarely. Ever been in an accident? Ever drove or rode in a vehicle with somebody intoxicated? Have they been violent verbally, physically at home or at school? Have they ever been sexually or physically abused, been under mobbing, or any acts of delinquency? Okay. So these are many of the questions that you can ask when you do the HEEADSSS. But I always say to my residents that if you don't have time to do all of them, there are two that you can never miss. And these are, how are things at school, how are things at home? And if one of those two, the answer is that, it could be better, there are things that you need to do and go further. Jerry was telling us that it's not only what you say, but at the time of the say it. Well, that's a nice way to say it. You know, think getting a flu shot, think of installing a virus protection software. Maybe kids will understand that a little better with time. But one important thing is, we're talking about adolescents, but do they consult very often? I know you know the answer, Amo. Do they consult? Yes. No, okay. Okay. How many would say that 10% of 15 to 24-year-old see their physician at least once a year? 10%. 10%, okay? Somebody would say 20%. Nobody. One. Somebody would say 50%. 70%. Get lost. Okay. These are European data. Okay. Not bad, is it? Between 70 and 90% or over 90% see their physician at least once a year. What happens is that very often they come for reasons that matter very little. They need a vaccine, okay? Or they come because they need a certificate to play basketball. Or they come because they were skating and they had a small injury, or things like that. Okay, things that they go to emergency room very often, very quickly, hop, 3 minutes and you're gone. And for many physicians, this is like a gift from heaven, because they're late in their, in their schedule, and it comes, it's 3 minutes and it's gone, so your schedule gets better. And this is a problem, because no matter what they come from, you shouldn't miss the opportunity to discuss with them, okay? This is something that you're going to be seeing more and more and more often, okay? A few years ago, I asked myself why my 2 boys rarely asked me questions. I mean, when I was their age, I asked my father many questions, and they do. And from time to time, they do now. Say, hey, what do you think about that? And I say, well, that's my opinion. So they seem reassured and say, well, yeah, that's what the internet said. So I'm glad that I agree with the internet. But there's something we will be seeing. But independently of the reason for consultation, you cannot miss the opportunity. Even if they come because they need a vaccination, just then it's going to be a quick consultation. Take the time to ask how things are going. Because one of the things that we know about adolescents is that they have what we call the hidden agenda. Okay? They may come for things that are have very little importance, but in the back of their mind they have other ideas. This is a study we did long ago, in 2002, where we asked young people 16 to 20, this is a huge sample, like 8,000 people, where they needed professional help. They thought they needed professional help for eating problems, sadness or depression, sleeping problems, problems with tobacco, with alcohol and drugs, or sexuality. Okay? And these are the percentages of boys and girls who said, yes, I need professional help for that. And from those who said, I need professional help, said, how many of them have consulted their physician for it? And these were the results. Okay, so that means that basically, the 37% of girls who said, I need professional help for sadness or depression, only 9% of them finally consulted. Okay, 91% of them are lost in nature. Same story for problems with alcohol or drugs. 15% of boys said, I need help. Only 3% finally consulted. And if we don't say, hey, these are things that we can discuss about, they will never do it. There's a fantastic study by Christina Berkeley in Sweden about young people with diabetes who were smokers. And they asked them, well, if you need advice about smoking, who are you going to talk to? Nobody, no one mentioned their medical team. This was something that you didn't discuss with them. Okay? So the hidden agenda is important here. Well, but now you know all the right questions to ask, but this is not enough. You also need to know what to do with the answers. Okay? Because if you ask your patient, do you smoke cannabis? Yes, 20 joints a day. Very good. Do you do anything else? This is not the good way to do. And this is important because a lot of our colleagues don't ask the questions because they don't know what we'll be able to do with the answers afterwards. This is a study done in the States some time ago, in 1999, about different physicians, so obstetricians, pediatricians, general family physicians, and internists, and the degree of counseling at some encounter with their adolescent patients. Well, the best ones were the gynecologists, 2 out of 3. Problem with the gynecology is that they only see half of the population, so that's one. And the worst ones were internists with 1 or 3. But overall, half of the office visits had absolutely no counseling at all. Okay? So they came, 80 to 90%, you saw it. They come, but we say nothing to them. One of the problems is to say, well, we don't have time. And this is a great excuse. especially when you live in Switzerland. But time is something that you can find. It's true, they come at the emergency room, you only have 5 minutes for your patient. Ask the questions. How are things going at home? How are things going in school? And if they don't go too well, then say, hey, we don't have time today, but in 2 days you just come, to a regular visit. In our hospital, we have now electronic data, electronic medical history, and this is a problem. Because in the old days, when everything was on paper, you could see that a kid who had a medical history like that, who had come to the emergency room 20 times in the last 30 days, say, there's something here. Okay? Now you don't see that because it's just everything electronic. But anyway, ask the 2 main questions. Always have a good reason for every question you ask. If you ask a question and I say, why do you want to do that? Say, I don't know. I was in London, I heard that guy say this is a question to ask, so I said to them, this is not a good reason. Okay? So have a good reason for every question you ask because it's going to save you time too. If you don't ask the question, you'll never know. That's something that we all do know. And how do you communicate with these adolescents? Well, a few things. The first one, have a conversation, not an interrogatory. Just talk with them and let them tell you how things are going. Be extremely specific in your questions. I have seen many kids that you ask them, do you drink alcohol? No. Have you ever been drunk? Oh, yes. And this is because for them, drinking alcohol is what adults do. Having their glass of wine with supper, or a whiskey when the friends come around at home, or something like that. For them, drinking and getting drunk is partying. This is not to drink, because they don't do that every day. They do it from time to time. So be very specific about your questions. Clarify concepts. Okay? Sometimes they talk in a way that, at least for me, it's difficult to understand exactly what they're talking about. Okay? So say, hey, are we talking about the same thing here? It's nice to summarize periodically. When you summarize, you not only assure that what you understood is correct, but you're repeating what the person told you, and that brings more ideas from the person very often, and he gives you more information. Avoid medical jargon. Okay? I remember once I said to a patient, don't worry, this is physiological. And she said to me, and do I have to take any medication for that? So just say it's normal, it's probably a better idea. Avoid closed questions. If you ask a thing that can be answered by yes or no, they're going to do it, yes or no. So use open questions as much as possible. A few things to do when you interview your adolescent. Go through the chart before you see the patient. Okay? It's terrible. I mean, if you go to your physician and you're there and he says, hey, how are you doing today? And you see that he has absolutely no idea of what's going on with you because he's still reading your chart. This is very depressing. You think, well, the interest is very little. So try to go through the chart or your notes before seeing your patient. Go to the waiting room to fetch the patient. That's something that you usually do. Introduce yourself by name, shake hands if appropriate. I like taking them more on adult level than when they are just kids. Present what you do. This is an important point. Okay. When I finished pediatrics, I spent 2 years in the States doing a fellowship in adolescent health, and when I came back, I met one of my mother's friends. My mother's friends were a group of ladies, extremely talkative, very nice, but extremely talkative. So she told me about all the things you could imagine, and at the end of this monologue, because I couldn't place a word, she said to me, so what have you been doing in the States? I said, well, I've been training in adolescent health. And she said, oh, so finally you went into psychiatry. Okay, because there is an association that adolescent health is psychiatry, which is not the case. So say, I'm a pediatrician, I'm not a psychiatrist, that's what I do. Assure confidentiality, that was the first point we talked about. Define the meaning of words, I just talked about that too. And let the patient tell you about the story without many interruptions and discussing as much as possible. Use open-ended questions, we talk about that, to clarify. Be extremely professional. They're not looking for a colleague or a friend, they're looking for a professional. Okay, so don't try to be more adolescent than they are. Listen in a non-judgmental manner if possible. Okay, just listen and think that you have all of you have been adolescents at some time too. We all have a skull in our closet. So, listen and don't be too judgmental. Ask questions in a non-threatening way. Have a conversation, as I said before. Accentuate the positive. And this is why I said that the HEEADSSS is an extremely good prevention tool. Okay? Imagine that you go to see your family doctor tonight, okay? And your family doctor asks you, do you smoke? And you answer yes. What do you get? For the next 10, 15 minutes, all the bad things of smoking. That's what you get usually. You should not smoke, blah, blah, blah. If you go to the same physician, he asks you, do you smoke? And you say no, what do you get? The next question, do you drink? Okay? And this, for somebody at a certain age, has no importance. But for an adolescent, when he says to you, I don't smoke, the right thing to do is say, hey, congratulations, that's great. Keep going that way. Because we are very good at saying all the things that they shouldn't do, but when they do things right, we never take the time to say, good job, keep doing that. Okay? So I tell my patients when they say, I don't smoke, say, you're a hero. Keep going doing that. Because you have a lot of pressure from friends, from the tobacco companies, from everyone to smoke. You're resisting, good. Because we know if we get to 19, 20 and they don't smoke, the chances that they will are extremely slim. Okay? So it's a good job, a good prevention to do. You can do with many other things. When I have a kid who says, are you sexually active? And says, no, say, good. But whenever you will be, remember that you have to use a condom. Okay? These are very simple messages to give, but it's a good time to do it. We already said, I already talked about having a good reason, about summarizing. 2, a few things that you should avoid when you're discussing with them. Medical jargon, I told you about that. Yes, no questions. Okay? This is not an adolescent thing only. When they ask us yes, no, we answer yes, no too. It's the shortest way. Okay? So try to have open questions. And to have open questions, it's easy to do a conversation. Don't try to be one of the gang. Okay? They're looking for a professional. They're looking for somebody who can give them advice. So be at your level. Avoid doing an interrogation, I already said, and avoid asking what you don't need to know. I once saw a resident asking a young adolescent girl, say, so do you have a boyfriend? Yes. Is he a nice guy? Yes. Do you have a good relationship with him? Yes. Have you been out for a long time? 3 months. Good. And it's really a nice guy? Yeah. Okay. So 10 minutes into it, say, what's the question you want to ask? If she's sexually active, just go for it. I mean, we have more problems asking the question than they have answering it. Okay, so just go for it. And don't ask things that you don't need to know. And if possible, avoid writing down during the interview or checking the record to get things. I think I'm getting to the end. This is the last joke. And I thank you for your attention.